Reaching the Hearts of Herefordshire is about the role of the ward councillor and how they interact with their community.
Because we live in an urban nation with urban solutions, to try and represent rural people and their problems is sometimes a real challenge. And I think that we need support and help in identifying what that role is and able to articulate that to the public and the third sector.
This was really about engaging differently and listening differently to communities, but also getting communities' ownership to doing something for themselves or doing even more for themselves.
It's very important to recognise the relationship which a local councillor has to his or her local community. And local councillors tend to come from communities and be part of those communities. So this project in part is about supporting councillors and local communities in making their voices heard.
Local government and public services have lost a lot of support over the last years, and we're seen as remote, increasingly, to the communities in which we support and look to provide services for. And we've got to do things differently.
You always learn from your community. They will always tell you something perhaps you hadn't thought of. You can always think you know something, but you can always add to it. And we've learned a lot, I think, from this particular campaign.
When the invitation first came, I thought, oh no, not another consultation. I was a bit sensitive thinking, oh no, trying to involve the community as well, but will they want to come along and be part of it? But I was so pleasantly surprised when it happened. And I think the first meeting we had in the Burton with local people there, and the question is, so what's good about living in Kington? And I think it was a winner from there on, really.
There were 2 events in each place, and the first event identified what was happening now. And then there was a period where the community leaders and services together went out and listened to people in the community, so people that we might not ordinarily listen to.
It wasn't being organised by the council, it was being organised by the council with ward members, with local community, and everybody was coming together to do that piece of work together, and it was fantastic.
I think what made the Hearts of Herefordshire meetings different was what often makes meetings different. It's a designed opportunity to sit down and talk about something that's uninterrupted time with a bunch of good heads, in the room, creative people thinking of things.
A dialogue was entered into that developed over the series of meetings. So it started off in a fairly staged way, but then developed, and also the people who were there took some ownership of the agenda, which was really important.
This was people round tables, getting into a conversation with each other. And I think because of that, people started to feel more confident and freer in terms of what they were saying.
Got to think about it in terms of, does the community really want to come and sit in meetings with council officers and hear about council things? No, they don't. Where is the community actually living and undertaking its daily life? Well, it's in places like the pub. And so a lot of our planning meetings took place in the pub. And indeed, we've continued with meetings in the pub, and that's generated a sense of trust, a sense of reality, but most importantly, a sense of enjoyment and fun.
All of the tables were pretty well commingled with local residents, local business people, the invitees, and a mix of council officers or staff, and a fair number of people from the non-government sector, the fundraisers and funders.
And an issue that developed in the course of the conversations that we had was around ensuring that rural areas are seen as viable centres of employment as well.
I think one of the interesting things that came out of the Kington process is we tried to map all of the public sector spend, the police, the NHS, the fire brigade, Department of Work and Pensions, and when we did that, we captured it in a video. We found out that actually the public sector was spending in excess of £20 million per annum in the town. When we showed that video, it was a bit of an eye-opener to everybody. I don't think everyone realised how much investment there was going into their community, and that put a different take on things. It made people think, actually, someone does care about our community, someone is investing in our community. And there were a lot of things, actually, that we all take for granted that we didn't understand was happening. The other thing that it spelt out was actually if you could redirect a small proportion of that to local priorities, it could have an even bigger impact.
And we just came and talked to these councillors, and They talked to us like adults. They let us get our view across. They didn't interrupt. They made sure we got our voices heard.
We were split up into loads of different groups, and we discussed what we wanted to happen, and the adults gave us a bit of advice of how we could make those things happen. And then what we did in the end, we came up to like a summary of like, and we introduced all our ideas to other groups, which was good because we knew that the adults were listening.
And it wasn't like how people usually think that they will sit and they'll talk and we'll talk and they'll interrupt us and everything. It was like they just sat and listened to us and took it into account of what we were saying.
It was very good to see some adults coming alive, seeing that role that they could play and engage young people into that, as well as young people seeing that these faceless counsellors actually were characters, had personalities and had a genuine interest and concern in their lives and their lives as part of the wider community life.
It's better that we were involved and were able to give the ideas that we want to give, just so that there's a different perspective on things.
On all its profiles, Herefordshire has a higher percentage of people over 60 or over 70. But often that is viewed in terms of increasing needs. I've always argued that that is a huge resource. Now, if you can bring together that time, those skills, into something constructive, it potentially is a massive well of resource to draw on.
I think there's a fine line, though, because if the council comes forward and says we're going to rely on you to do our work, I don't think it will be well received. However, if the council comes forward and says, through your neighbours and through you, we've identified these issues that we have to work on together, I think that kind of an approach makes a lot more sense.
The democracy thing then starts to take a life of its own. More and more people will become involved because they feel it's a voice, their voice can be heard.
But what we get is the additional bonus of the community thinking about how they can assist and help in actually delivering those services, which means that we really do have a really good chance here of focusing our resources on where they really need to be focused.
I think the future for local government must lie in a debate with its local communities about where priorities really lie, and a debate with local communities about how resources are used. Resources will be very tight for the next few years, and things will only move forward positively if we base our way forward on those very active and sensible debates.
I think if we can find a golden thread that runs through the community, and then you can then bind everyone together so that they have a common aim, then people will work very closely together.
I don't think you can beat going out and listening to the man in the street and the ordinary person saying, actually, this is what I would like the council, or this is what I would like the health service to do for me.
I think there are two questions in communities. What matters most for you and what can't you get sorted? And anything is sortable if you've got a can-do attitude.
And that is the key role that local councillors will have in the future, particularly in rural areas, coming up with the solutions. How do you deliver that quality of service provision across a large geographical area?
There's no doubt about it that I think that the officers have learned a lot from taking part in the process, because they've heard what the people really do think about what goes on in the council.
I found going out to meeting the public, as it were, people who use our services, pretty inspirational, because they were able to give a fairly honest view on how the council's performing.
Once people have got a voice or a face in the local authority or the PCT or the police to communicate with, things can happen. The community feels empowered, it feels enabled. That's the big thing that makes a difference. That's what makes it exciting. It's also what makes it fun. I would recommend it to everybody.